Judge Edward Blackwell sat in his large wooden chair in courtroom number 3. It was Friday afternoon, and he wanted to finish quickly. The room was hot, and he was tired. He looked at the clock and sighed. 10 more cases before he could go home. Next case, he called out, not looking up from his papers. A young black woman walked forward. She wore simple clothes, a blue cardigan, dark trousers, and worn shoes. Her name was Olivia Thompson. She held her papers tightly, her hands shaking slightly. Judge Blackwell finally looked up. His cold blue eyes narrowed. He had seen this woman before. "Miss Thompson," he said in a bored voice, "this is your 3rd parking violation this month." He flipped through his papers. 3 tickets in the same area. The city rules are clear. Olivia took a deep breath. "Your Honor, if I may explain." "The fine is £500, Judge Blackwell interrupted. Due within 30 days. Olivia's eyes widened. £500? "Your Honor, that's almost my entire month's rent." The judge frowned. He didn't like when people argued. "Perhaps you should have thought about that before repeatedly breaking the law." "But the signs in that area contradict each other," Olivia said, her voice steady despite her nervousness. "One sign says parking is allowed after 6 p.m., but another sign says no parking between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. I parked at 6:30, thinking it was allowed." Judge Blackwell waved his hand dismissively. "The city parking authority issued the ticket. They know the rules." "But the rules aren't clear," Olivia insisted. She pulled out photographs from her folder. "I took pictures of the signs. They truly don't match." The judge didn't even look at the photos. "Miss Thompson, the court's time is valuable. If you want to contest this, file a formal appeal. Pay the fine or face additional penalties." Next case. The court clerk called the next name. Olivia stood there for a moment, her face a mixture of frustration and disappointment. Then she gathered her papers and turned to leave. As she walked away, Judge Blackwell glanced up. Something in her posture caught his attention. She wasn't walking away defeated. Her head was high, her back straight. Their eyes met briefly, and what he saw wasn't fear or anger but something else, a quiet determination, a silent dignity that made him suddenly uncomfortable. For a moment, Judge Blackwell felt a twinge of doubt. Had he been too quick to dismiss her? Should he have looked at those photos? But the next case was already starting, and he pushed the thought away. He had been a judge for nearly 40 years. He knew the law. He knew people made excuses. This was just another routine case. Yet as the afternoon continued, his mind kept returning to Miss Thompson. Something about her seemed different from the usual people who appeared before him. She had been prepared, articulate, and respectful even in the face of his dismissal. That evening, as Judge Blackwell drove home, he passed through the area where Olivia had received her tickets. He slowed down, looking at the parking signs. To his surprise, he saw what she had described, 2 signs with contradicting information, one saying parking was allowed after 6 p.m., another prohibiting parking until 7 p.m. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered to himself. For the first time in years, Judge Blackwell felt a small pang of regret. He had been so quick to judge, so unwilling to listen. He wondered how many others had stood before him with legitimate complaints that he had dismissed. At home, he poured himself a glass of scotch and sat in his favorite chair. The face of Miss Thompson kept appearing in his mind. There had been something in her eyes, not just intelligence, but a kind of knowing that made him uneasy. It was just a parking ticket, he told himself. Not a murder trial. But deep down, Judge Blackwell knew it wasn't about the ticket. It was about fairness, about taking the time to listen. It was about seeing the person standing before him as a human being, not just another case number. As he sipped his drink, he wondered if their paths would ever cross again. Little did he know, fate had much bigger plans for both of them. 3 weeks passed since Judge Blackwell had fined Olivia Thompson. He had almost forgotten about her when he arrived at the National Judicial Conference at the Grand Kensington Hotel in London. The hotel was beautiful, with high ceilings and crystal chandeliers. Judges from all over the country gathered there to discuss important legal matters. Judge Blackwell collected his name badge and program from the registration desk. He flipped through the schedule, looking for interesting talks. One title caught his eye: Hidden Inequalities, How Municipal Codes Affect Different Communities. The speaker's name made him stop and read again: Dr. Olivia Thompson. It couldn't be the same woman, he muttered to himself. He found his way to the main conference hall and took a seat near the front. The room was filling quickly with judges and lawyers in expensive suits. Judge Blackwell nodded to a few colleagues he knew. The conference director walked to the podium and tapped the microphone. "Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to introduce our keynote speaker today. Dr. Olivia Thompson holds doctorates from Oxford and Cambridge, specializing in urban legal structures and discriminatory municipal codes. Her recent publication has been cited by the High Court, and today she'll discuss her groundbreaking research on unequal enforcement of minor infractions." Judge Blackwell sat up straighter, his heart beating faster. A woman walked confidently to the podium. She wore an elegant navy suit with a simple pearl necklace. Her hair was neatly styled, and she carried herself with complete assurance. It was her, the woman he had fined for parking violations just 3 weeks ago. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice strong and clear. "Today we'll examine how seemingly neutral civic regulations can become tools of systemic inequality." Judge Blackwell felt his face grow hot. He suddenly remembered dismissing her without even looking at her evidence. He had treated her like just another person making excuses. But now she stood before hundreds of the country's top legal minds, speaking with authority and expertise. They were all listening to her carefully, taking notes, nodding in agreement. Dr. Thompson presented her research, showing how parking rules, housing codes, and minor infractions affected poor communities more harshly than wealthy ones. She had data, charts, and real-life examples. Her presentation was brilliant. "In one city," she explained, "we found areas with contradictory parking signs. These were predominantly in lower-income neighborhoods. The confusion created by these signs led to thousands of pounds in fines for residents already struggling financially." Judge Blackwell sank lower in his seat. She was describing exactly what she had tried to tell him in court. After her talk, everyone stood and applauded. The Chief Justice himself walked up to congratulate her. Judge Blackwell clapped too, feeling smaller by the minute. During the coffee break, Judge Blackwell stood alone, holding his cup awkwardly. He watched as important judges and lawyers surrounded Dr. Thompson, eager to speak with her. "Quite impressive, isn't she?" asked Roger Phillips, a fellow judge who had walked up beside him. "Indeed," Blackwell mumbled, sipping his coffee. "Did you know she grew up in council housing? Single mother, worked 3 jobs to put herself through university. Now she's changing how we think about legal codes. Remarkable woman." Judge Blackwell's coffee suddenly tasted bitter. He had judged her by her appearance in his courtroom, never considering who she might really be. As people began moving back to their seats for the next session, Judge Blackwell found himself face to face with Dr. Thompson. She was even more impressive up close: intelligent eyes, confident posture, kind smile. She looked at his name badge, and recognition flickered in her eyes. "Judge Blackwell," she said, extending her hand. "I believe I stood before you recently. Under rather different circumstances." He shook her hand, feeling the weight of shame press on his shoulders. "Dr. Thompson, I owe you an apology." She smiled, but her eyes remained serious. "Perhaps what you owe is not to me, but to the countless others who stand before you without advanced degrees to earn your respect." Her words hit him hard. Before he could respond, she was called away by the conference director. Throughout the rest of the day, Judge Blackwell couldn't focus on the other talks. He kept thinking about Dr. Thompson's words. How many people had he failed to truly see or hear in his courtroom? How many stories had he dismissed without a second thought? For the first time in decades, Judge Edward Blackwell began to question the way he did his job. And it was all because of a parking ticket and the remarkable woman he had misjudged. That evening, after the first day of the conference, Judge Blackwell couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Dr. Thompson's words. He got out of bed and sat by the window, looking out at the night lights of London. What did she mean, he asked himself. The countless others without advanced degrees? He thought about his courtroom. Every day, people stood before him. Some had lawyers, some didn't. Some spoke well, some didn't. Had he treated them differently based on how they looked or spoke? The next morning, Judge Blackwell arrived early to the conference. He checked the program and saw that Dr. Thompson was giving a workshop called Seeing the Person Behind the Case. He decided to attend. The room was smaller than the main hall, with chairs arranged in a circle. About 30 judges and lawyers were there. Dr. Thompson stood by a whiteboard, writing some notes. When Judge Blackwell walked in, she looked up and seemed surprised to see him. She gave a small smile and continued her preparation. The workshop began with everyone introducing themselves. When it was Judge Blackwell's turn, he felt nervous, something he hadn't felt in years. "I'm Judge Edward Blackwell," he said. "I've been on the bench for nearly 40 years. Dr. Thompson nodded. "Thank you for joining us, Judge Blackwell. I hope you find today's session valuable." The workshop was unlike any legal training Judge Blackwell had attended. Dr. Thompson shared stories of real people affected by small court decisions. She talked about a single mother who lost her job because she couldn't pay a series of small fines that added up over time. She told them about an elderly man who nearly lost his home because of a municipal code violation he didn't understand. "These aren't just case numbers," Dr. Thompson said. "These are human lives. Each decision we make in the legal system ripples out and affects families, communities, futures." During a break, Judge Blackwell stood by the refreshments table, deep in thought. Dr. Thompson approached him. "You seem troubled, Judge Blackwell," she said, pouring herself a cup of tea. "I am," he admitted. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday. About owing something to those without degrees." She nodded. "May I ask you something, Judge? What did you think when I stood before you in your courtroom?" Judge Blackwell felt uncomfortable but decided to be honest. "I saw someone who probably didn't understand the law. Someone making excuses." "And what did you see when I spoke at the podium yesterday?" "An expert. Someone worth listening to." "Yet I was the same person," she said gently. "The only difference was the context, the clothes, the title." Judge Blackwell nodded slowly. "I understand your point." "Do you?" she asked. "Then let me ask you this, how many people come through your courtroom every day? How many of them might be experts in their own right? How many might have legitimate reasons for their situations that you never hear because you don't take the time to listen?" The question hit Judge Blackwell hard. He had never thought about it that way. "I don't know," he admitted. "That's a good start," Dr. Thompson said. "Not knowing is the beginning of learning." After the break, the workshop continued. Dr. Thompson asked everyone to share a time when they realized they had misjudged someone. Many judges had stories, but Judge Blackwell remained quiet. At the end of the session, Dr. Thompson asked if anyone had questions. Judge Blackwell slowly raised his hand. The room fell silent as he stood up. "Dr. Thompson, you've given us much to think about," he said. "I'm wondering, for those of us who have been on the bench for decades, set in our ways, what is the first step toward change?" Dr. Thompson looked at him thoughtfully. "The first step is the hardest, Judge Blackwell. It's recognizing that justice isn't just about following the rules, but understanding how those rules affect real people. It's about listening, truly listening, to those who stand before you." That afternoon, Judge Blackwell skipped the conference dinner. Instead, he went for a long walk through London. He passed by areas he rarely visited, neighborhoods where people worked hard jobs, where children played on small patches of concrete instead of grassy gardens, where life was different from his comfortable existence. He thought about Dr. Thompson growing up in council housing, working 3 jobs to put herself through university. He thought about how quickly he had dismissed her in his courtroom. "I need to do better," he said to himself as he walked. "I need to really see people." For the first time in years, Judge Edward Blackwell felt something shift inside him, like a door that had been locked for too long was finally beginning to open. The final day of the conference arrived, and Judge Blackwell found himself sitting in the front row for Dr. Thompson's closing session. The room was packed, with people standing along the walls. Her reputation had spread throughout the conference, and everyone wanted to hear her speak one last time. Today, Dr. Thompson began, "I want to talk about second chances, not just for those who come before the court, but for those who sit behind the bench." She told a story about her own mother, who had once been ticketed for driving with a broken taillight. Unable to pay the fine, her mother missed her court date because she couldn't afford to take time off work. A warrant was issued for her arrest. What started as a simple taillight became a nightmare that nearly cost her job and home. But there was one judge, Dr. Thompson continued, who took the time to listen. "Who saw my mother as a person, not a case number. That judge changed the course of our lives by simply taking 5 extra minutes to understand." Judge Blackwell listened intently, feeling each word sink into his heart. How many lives could he have changed with just 5 extra minutes? After the session, people crowded around Dr. Thompson. Judge Blackwell waited patiently until the crowd thinned. When he finally approached her, she smiled warmly. "Judge Blackwell, I'm glad to see you again. Dr. Thompson, I wanted to thank you. These past few days have been eye-opening for me." She nodded. The most powerful people in the legal system are not those who make the laws but those who apply them every day. People like you, Judge Blackwell. He took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about those parking tickets. About how quickly I dismissed your evidence. I was wrong. It wasn't just about the tickets," she said gently. "I know that now," he replied. "It was about dignity. About being seen and heard." They walked together toward the exit. Judge Blackwell felt a need to share something with her. "When I was a young lawyer," he began, "I wanted to help people. Somewhere along the way, I became focused on efficiency, on clearing cases. I forgot the people behind the files." Dr. Thompson nodded. "It happens to many in the system. The question is, what will you do now?" Judge Blackwell stopped walking. "I'd like to learn more about your work. Perhaps there are changes I could make in my courtroom." For the first time, Dr. Thompson's professional demeanor softened into genuine surprise. "I'd be happy to share my research with you." They exchanged contact information, and Judge Blackwell promised to call her the following week. On the train ride home, Judge Blackwell thought about his courtroom. He mentally reviewed recent cases, seeing them through new eyes. Had he been fair to the young man with the traffic violation? Had he really listened to the elderly woman fighting an eviction? Had he given enough time to the teenager caught shoplifting? When he arrived home, Judge Blackwell did something he hadn't done in years. He went to his study, pulled out his law school textbooks, and began to read. Not about procedures or precedents, but about justice and equity. Books he had once found inspiring but had let gather dust for decades. The next morning, Judge Blackwell arrived at his courtroom earlier than usual. He spoke with his clerk, Mary, who had worked with him for 15 years. "Mary, I'd like to make some changes to how we run the courtroom." Mary looked surprised. "What kind of changes, Your Honor?" "For starters, I want to add 15 minutes to each case. Less rushing, more listening." Mary's eyebrows raised. "That will mean fewer cases each day." "Then we'll have fewer cases," he said firmly. "Quality over quantity." "May I ask what brought this on, Your Honor?" Judge Blackwell smiled slightly. "Let's just say I received a lesson in humility from an unexpected teacher." As the day's first case was called, Judge Blackwell adjusted his robes and took a deep breath. A nervous-looking man approached the bench, clutching papers in his trembling hands. "Good morning," Judge Blackwell said, his voice gentler than usual. "Before we begin, I want you to know that I'm here to listen. Please, take your time and tell me what brought you here today." The man looked up, surprised at the judge's tone. "Thank you, Your Honor," he said, relief evident in his voice. In that moment, Judge Blackwell felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time, the true meaning of his title, Justice of the Peace. Not just an enforcer of laws, but a bringer of peace through justice. And it had all begun with a parking ticket and a remarkable woman who had refused to be invisible. 1 month after the conference, Judge Blackwell's courtroom had changed. He now sat differently on his chair, leaning forward, listening more carefully. His staff noticed the change. The court clerk, Mary, told her sister, "It's like he's become a different person." Today, a young man named Tom Wilson stood before Judge Blackwell. Tom had 3 parking tickets in the same area where Olivia Thompson had been ticketed. "Mr. Wilson," Judge Blackwell said, "please explain your situation." Tom looked surprised to be asked. Most judges just handed out the fine. "Well, Your Honor, I work night shifts at the hospital. I'm a cleaner there. When I finish at 6:30 a.m., I park near my flat to sleep. But I keep getting tickets, even though one sign says parking is allowed after 6 a.m. Are there other signs in the area?" Judge Blackwell asked. "Yes, Your Honor. Another sign says no parking until 8 a.m. They don't match." I tried to explain to the ticket officer, but he said to take it up with the court. In the past, Judge Blackwell would have simply ordered Tom to pay the fine. Today, he nodded and said, "Do you have photographs of these signs?" Tom's face brightened. "Yes, I do." He pulled out his phone and showed the judge pictures of the contradicting signs, the exact same ones Olivia Thompson had tried to show him weeks ago. Judge Blackwell studied the photos carefully. "I see the problem. Mr. Wilson, I'm reducing your fine to a warning. And I'm ordering a review of the signage in that area. Clear communication is essential for fair enforcement of our laws." Tom's shoulders relaxed. "Thank you, Your Honor. That fine would have taken my whole week's pay." After court finished for the day, Judge Blackwell made a call to the city's transportation department. He spoke with the director about the confusing signs. Then he made another call to Dr. Olivia Thompson. "Dr. Thompson? This is Judge Blackwell. I wonder if we might meet to discuss something important." The next afternoon, Judge Blackwell visited Dr. Thompson at her university office. Books lined the walls, and papers covered her desk. She welcomed him with a warm smile. "Judge Blackwell, it's good to see you again. How have you been since the conference?" "Busy," he said, taking a seat. "I've been making some changes in my courtroom. Listening more. Taking more time with each case." "That's wonderful to hear," she said. "But I want to do more," he continued. "I've started a judicial review committee. We're examining how our court handles minor infractions, focusing on clarity and fairness. I was hoping you might consult with us." Dr. Thompson leaned forward, clearly interested. "What prompted this?" Judge Blackwell smiled. "A young man came to court today with the exact same issue you had, those contradicting parking signs. This time, I actually looked at the evidence." Dr. Thompson's eyes softened. "And? You were right. The signs contradict each other. I've already called the transportation department to fix it. But it made me wonder how many other unfair situations we have in our city that need fixing." "Judge Blackwell," Dr. Thompson said with a smile, "I'd be honored to work with your committee." Over the next few months, Judge Blackwell and Dr. Thompson worked together closely. They reviewed court procedures, examined fine structures, and looked for problems in the system. They created new guidelines for judges to ensure everyone got a fair hearing, regardless of their education or background. Word spread about their work. Other courts in other cities began to adopt their ideas. Newspapers wrote stories about the judge who learned to listen and the scholar who changed the courts. 1 year after their first meeting in his courtroom, Judge Blackwell invited Dr. Thompson to speak to all the judges in the city. Before her talk, he stood to introduce her. "A year ago," he said, "I thought I knew everything about justice. I had been a judge for 40 years. But then Dr. Thompson stood in my courtroom, and later at a conference podium, and taught me the most important lesson of my career, that true justice begins with listening." Dr. Thompson smiled at him from her seat. "Today," Judge Blackwell continued, "our court has reduced unnecessary fines by 60%. Repeat offenses are down. Public trust in our system is up. All because we started seeing the people behind the cases. After the event, Dr. Thompson and Judge Blackwell walked together through the courthouse gardens. "You've come a long way from that first day in court," she said. "I had a good teacher," he replied. "We all have something to learn and something to teach," Dr. Thompson said. "Even judges. Even scholars." Judge Blackwell nodded. "The greatest lesson I've learned is this: justice without compassion isn't really justice at all." As they walked, a young woman passed by them on the courthouse steps. She looked nervous, clutching papers for her upcoming case. Judge Blackwell smiled at her reassuringly. He didn't know her story yet, but now, at least, he was ready to listen.